Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Energy Markets podcast. It is the 5th of September, and we have Brent crude oil trading again in the lower end of the 70s and presenting a continuous concern to oil producers that indeed prices are at lows that they've not seen this year, again dropping yesterday, seeming to at least hold temporarily this morning in early Asian trade under $73 a barrel, but not falling anymore. So let's get into the session and thank, of course, our regular commentators for returning to this season from all over the world. Let's kick off in the far throes of Asia. Clyde Russell, Asia Commodities and Energy columnist at Thomson Reuters. Clyde, your thoughts as to what's been happening in the oil markets? We've seen the wider financial markets give up a lot of gains, oil as well. Is this an overreaction?
I think it's probably a bit of an overreaction. I mean, as you may recall, I've been saying for quite some time that Asia's demand, and particularly that of China, is running well behind the somewhat optimistic forecast of OPEC and even the IEA. So I've been expecting this for some time. It just seems that the rest of the market has finally woken up to the reality that Asia is not importing the amounts that would be needed to justify these optimistic forecasts. But I think what we're doing now is we're amplifying any bearish news whatsoever and basically ignoring any bullish developments. I mean, you had on Tuesday, Brent fell by 5%, which is a fairly big one-day fall. And that was on the mere hope that there's going to be some kind of deal that allows Libya to resume oil exports. Not actual exports resuming, not production starting up again. The hope that in 30 days' time, there'll be something happening there. That's what the news was. And that sent oil down 5%. That to me is an overreaction.
Laurie Hitayan, MENA Director, Natural Resource Governance Institute, currently based out of Brussels, tracking the European Union, but a long-standing watcher of all things Libya. Laurie, what are your thoughts on the outcome? Libya has been through a variety of moments over the last decade that have been sort of crisis level and then eased back again. Your thoughts on this latest one?
Good morning to Sean and to all, and thank you for inviting me for another season. So this is the power struggle continuing between East and West, and always when it becomes at its peak, they use either the oil issue, or even now we're seeing the central bank, which is becoming even more serious, which means that they are really like the power struggle is at its peak. So I guess like the market has been kind of used to the fact that we would have temporary shocks in Libya. It's purely for political reasons, and then it's going to come back. So that's why we haven't seen that like the market was alarmed that there is the stop, and because already there's a lot of oil in the market, demand worldwide is not looking good. So for Libya was just like, I guess, just a side news, not important. Definitely it's important for the regional powers involved in the power struggle, but not much to say about like the cut and how it affected the markets in increasing or decreasing prices. So it is becoming natural to know that, yeah, Libya is there, but we know that Libya is not, we cannot trust that the Libyan flows will continue steadily and comfortably. So there will be like these kind of glitches from time to time because of political struggle.
Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert. Thank you so much for rejoining us, Narendra. The outlook for India, obviously, we've seen uncertainty with uncertain China demand. Outlook has been projected as one of the reasons that the oil markets are struggling at the moment, but yet India continues to be growing. We saw the second quarter this year reporting close to 7%. Outlook for Indian energy demand holding through the next quarter?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look at demand for petroleum products, across India from north to south, east to west is very strong. In fact, if you look at the global landscape, India is one of the very few bright spots where the demand for petroleum products is growing and growing steadily, which is, of course, is fantastic. But at the same time, low oil prices, since we import roughly 88% of total requirement of oil. So low oil prices is always a good news. But at the same time, the data we are getting from China or the perspectives we are getting from China are not very comforting. India would not like to see China kind of economically imploding or getting in some kind of difficult situation, because that's not good for us. We would like to see a stable China, especially economically. And but we understand at the same time we are looking at the market very carefully. And the way we see it, there are basically two dilemmas. On the one hand, OPEC wants to make sure that there is steady growth in demand for crude oil world over. They want to see it, and they want to work towards it. But at the same time, they want oil prices to be back in the region of $80 to $90 per barrel. So how things are going to shape up, India is keeping very close eye. But our own sense is that probably oil may slip, Brent, especially since in India we benchmark via Brent. So we think that probably it will slip to $70 per barrel before it starts climbing up a bit. But India's in a very comfortable, very space, because 70 is a good price, 75 is okay, $80 per barrel Brent is something India can deal with. So, but the important thing for India is that Middle East, especially the oil exporting Middle East, they remain politically and economically stable. We will not like to see India can't afford any kind of economic turmoil due to low oil prices in Saudi Arabia or UAE or across the Middle East. That's not good news for us, because our economy is quite dependent, or rather interdependent. So we would like to see stable oil prices. Even $80 per barrel is okay. $70 is always welcome, but we know that it won't stay there, $70 per barrel for a long time. So keeping a close eye, but demand for petroleum products, crude oil, India is growing. Overall sentiment is very positive. But when it comes to those sentiments about the economic India, the way India is looking today, let's say next quarter or 2025, very, very positive.
Clyde, just sort of picking up on that point, as Narendra said, oil in the low 70s won't stay there for very long. And with that, sort of low oil prices are the cure for a lot of things. And when it comes to the demand side, and China is somewhat famous for taking advantage of these opportunities of low oil prices, or lower from the average trend for 2024 has been $82 a barrel in Brent, and we're now about $10 below that. We saw Chinese imports elevate again in August up to 11 million barrels. Do you expect the Chinese to take advantage of these prices?
I would think there's an increasing risk that they do, especially if they think that the sort of $70, maybe even a little bit lower, is as Narendra says, not going to be a long-term, not sustained. They might take advantage and buy. On the other hand, if you're starting to look at things, you're starting to get the major investment banks, people like that, coming out and being quite bearish. Citi saying unless OPEC puts more output cuts in place, oil's going to go to $60 a barrel. So the Chinese might be making that sort of consideration. The truth is they don't really need to import much more than 10 million barrels a day at the moment. So, that's kind of anything above that, they're probably putting into some form of storage. So it remains to be seen whether, $70 is actually cheap enough, or whether they think that they can get a better deal in another couple of months. Certainly in the past, as you say, when they've perceived oil prices are low and are likely to recover, they have gone out and bought quite big. But there's also that little nagging thing of how much storage they actually have left. I mean, certainly we're, as you know, they don't release their levels of strategic storage or even commercial inventories. So, you're sometimes it's a best guesstimate. But basically, the kind of prevailing market view is that they've filled the strategic stockpiles to the levels that they want. So they're really only playing with commercial inventories at the moment. But that doesn't mean that they won't buy if they perceive things to be cheap. But I think they're probably thinking, maybe there's another $5 on the downside.
Laurie, your thoughts on that? Because this could become a game of chicken, really, in terms of OPEC Plus, and particularly the major players in OPEC Plus, which are based here in the Gulf, could, where their appetite. And we've seen in recent years that they haven't been comfortable with prices at these low 70s levels, and action has been taken. Where do you think they sit now and the decision that they're facing?
Look, I think they're looking at the future, right? Because these low prices are something that has been always said that the future is not for oil anymore, even though it will take time. And still the economies are built on oil and gas and hydrocarbons. So this energy transition yes, it is happening, but it's not going to happen fast. All that rhetoric, about like this energy transition stuff on the producer countries and how they see it. But in fact, like the bottom line is that we will continue being in a world where energy transition is becoming serious, and then you will be going into a world where the need for oil and gas would come less and less, and then therefore these prices issues are there. So kind of now they are living with what the future scenario is supposed to be. They're living with it. So I think that this is all for them kind of a preparation, and how their economies are resilient to these kind of changes, to low prices or even to low demand in the future. And this is what I think, like now they look like it is like basically building their structures, building their economies based on these kind of things. So for now, it's yes, maybe this is not the best. They would want to have higher prices, but what can they do more? It's like they said that we have all the spare capacity that's sitting on the side because we want to see higher prices. Demand is not helping. As long as demand is not helping, what can they do? Maybe even lowering a bit so that demand can catch up and the economies of the world catch up. Then there will be another high prices, a cycle of high prices. So I think it's just like looking at the now, at the same time looking at the longer term and what benefits them. And I guess like for the UAE, for Saudi Arabia, if we just want to talk about these two big countries, they're navigating through these changes. So that's why I think like what will they do? Will they come back with this extra that they said that they will come back with? Would they come with all the extras or part of it because of?
Well, it's certainly been very important to the UAE. They've been advocating for some years now for a bigger production quota. They'd be reluctant to give that up, to suspend that happening.
It will come, but like again, like is it going to be the full, like what they pledged from the beginning, or would there be some changes that they would say, okay, we're bringing back, but with this and this and this, and with compliance, like if Iraq is compliant again, so that would kind of again equalize or balance the market, all of that. So it's not that it's not easy, but I guess like we have to wait for a couple of weeks before like seeing how they're thinking and how they will react.
I'm not sure they've got weeks on that one. If they want to change direction of travel for the October 1st increase, they would need to do that literally, the next 5 minutes. Time would not be on their side there. Narendra, if you're OPEC plus, if you're looking at this, do you sort of think maybe this is a much bigger storm that they have control over, and this is really about the world adjusting to the change in the Fed's pricing on money with the cuts? It's a tipping point from a few years of tightening economic monetary policy to now one of easing, and just that adjustment is the shock, and we really need to get through that adjustment before knowing how to react, that this is beyond the impact or the control of managing the energy markets.
Well, a good question. You see, if you look at the history of oil prices since, let's say, 1970, I mean, we have seen these kind of values before. It's nothing new. I mean, I just spent 10 days in Europe attending several energy conferences. And when you look at the world from the global north, Europe, America, and all that, I mean, they paint a very different picture. The narratives they put on the table are very, very different. I mean, and people like me, we don't buy that narrative. I mean, like on energy transition, they say energy transition. Well, energy transition, very good. But the fact is 80% of global energy is still fossil fuel, and it's not going to change anytime soon. Even by 2050, fossil fuels would still be doing very strong in globally, 50%, according to Western data. According to our data, about 57%. When we go by our own projection, a little over 60% in India, markets like India. So that's energy transition. Look at, for instance, renewables.
And does the lowering of interest rates by the Fed support the transition? Does it support fossil fuels? Is there a winner in that?
Well, my sense is that, it indirectly supports, because fossil fuels will be the gainer, the beneficiary. Because when it comes to renewable, how does renewable benefit? If you look at the coal data world over, all solar power development the last 5 years have happened in the developed world and in China and to some extent India. So the rest of, let's say, 6 billion people, are not yet affected. They're out of it. So how do we look at it? So that's what I'm saying, that, renewable fossil fuels, especially oil and gas, for majority of countries around the world will continue to play a very important role. Or even, just let me allow to add one line. Even, for instance, when, oil is not used for transportation, let's say by 2050, not so much as for instance today, even then it will be a very important, a component of the whole thing of the economy in terms of plastic, in terms of petrochemicals, even in artificial intelligence, or for instance, the renewable modes of transport is all plastic. So where is that going to come from? So my own sense is that I'm very optimistic, and I think large economies like India, they should not be, demonizing oil. China should not be demonizing, because oil will continue to be very important for economy like India for a long time to come. Though we are giving major push to renewables. But just quick comment on OPEC. OPEC is passing through some turbulence and tough times, and OPEC needs to modernize the way they look at the world. The days when OPEC could dictate or OPEC could look upon itself as some kind of lord, that era is over. They need to.
But that lord now also includes your good friends in Russia. This is not just an OPEC world. This is an OPEC plus world.
Well, our West is also a good friend. The US is also a good friend. Russia is a good friend. China is a good friend. I mean, we have our own universe. So we don't have any enemy. So point here is that, the Russia is important. We are buying roughly 40% of total requirement of oil from Russia. Why? Economics. No politics, no love. It's pure economics. Tomorrow, if US can provide that at that rate as Russia is providing, we'll go to Russia.
But the point is that OPEC plus now includes Russia, and so it's not just OPEC. So their ability to influence is greater now than it was.
Well, the point is, we have seen the kind of struggle that OPEC headquarters is going for. It's not as simple as that. Russia may be part of it. They may be OPEC plus, look like stronger. But at the same time, now they're trying to do what they're trying to do, and they find at the same time, look, their own influence is rather limited. So when it comes to the overall global economy, the way it is today, and a very fragmented world, where we have got, practically two worlds. World is divided in two parts. And we have also got a world where basically even oil, the way it's consumed, the way prices are fixed, the way oil prices are negotiated and all, it's a new world has emerged, led by China, led by Iran, led by Russia, and so on and so forth. Big consumers like India on the other side. So I think it's a more fragmented world. So we can't really look at the world the same way as we used to, let's say, before February 2022.
Russell, the situation with the situation in China, Clyde, is that there's been an expectation through the year that that China is going to come out with this sort of big stimulus, that we're going to wake up to the headline, and like we saw in America, we get checks in the post to everybody during the COVID period. And yet that's not happening. The latest is China considering cutting interest rates on personal mortgages to try and help homeowners. A lot of the stress seemed to be in the homeowner space. What are you seeing in China? A, its weakness, is it over-exaggerated? And B, any expectation for the cavalry coming over the hill eventually?
Well, I think with China, you've always got it's a very big economy, very many moving parts. There are parts that are in obvious trouble, residential property being the poster child for that. I think the problems there are well known. I'm not even sure if easier monetary policy, lower rates, that kind of stuff will actually help. That's just going to take a time to work through. Other parts are still going all right. And you talked about a lack of stimulus. Well, the Chinese have actually decided that they're stimulating consumer spending, and the way that they're doing that is actually very, sort of long-term bad for oil demand, because they're basically encouraging people to trade in their petrol and diesel vehicles for electric vehicles, and they're giving them money to do so. So, that's, the sort of consumer stimulus that Beijing is putting in place is really aimed at increasing the use of electric vehicles and decreasing the amount of oil. If I look at it, the Chinese don't have a formal policy, but it's quite clear what they're trying to do is lower their reliance on imported oil. And they're quite happy to use their sort of 60% coal-fired grid to power EVs, because the coal is locally available. They do import, but they don't import a huge amount compared to the amount of oil they import. So I think that there's a shift there, a structural shift that I think OPEC, the IEA, they haven't really caught up to. I mean, OPEC's latest monthly report in August was still saying that Chinese oil demand is going up by 700,000 barrels a day this year. I mean, I know there's a difference between demand and imports, but let's be honest, it's imports that drive the price. Imports are down 300,000 barrels a day for the first 7 months of the year. There's a massive gap that people just aren't really talking about there. And I think, you're seeing a structural change in China that's being exacerbated by some
I mean, when you do take that point, it's sort of the 30 years of OPEC, of China being the source of that incremental demand growth is clearly over. And OPEC, you're saying, is not sort of acknowledging or being really absorbing that shift. We even have big Chinese national energy companies saying they're knocking on the door of peak oil demand.
I think they are. If you look at it, and it's not, I mean, there's all sorts of things. The only sort of really strong sort of area in China for oil products is aviation. Trucking, they're now somewhere up to like 30% of all new trucks sold are powered by LNG. So that's, yes, that's boosting their LNG imports, but it's, clearly cutting their need for diesel. So, the petrochemical industry is it's still very big, but the amount that they're actually adding to is kind of tapering off. They're really, there are a few more refineries being built, but they're closing old ones at a faster rate. So you can sort of see all these peak things happening in China. But what remains, sort of still fairly positive is they are going to level off at a very, very high level. I mean, an almost unprecedented level of demand, and it's going to stay. It might ease a little bit, but it's going to be high for a very long time. So that's still sort of a bullish thing. But if you're thinking that China is going to keep on adding 1 million barrels a day of import demand every year, yeah, that process is.
All we want to know is what are they going to do in the next few months? And let's go to the survey question, which is sort of attempting to answer that question. Brent crude oil prices have averaged around $82 a barrel year to date through August. What will they average over the remaining of the year, September through December? We've had 82, the average for Brent print over the first 8 months. First 2/3 of the year. What will the last third of the year deliver as an average? Closer to 85, closer to 80, closer to 75, closer to 70, which is where we are in this moment as we ask this question. We're knocking, we wouldn't have thought we'd come out this summer knocking on the door of 70, but that's where the answer is today. But what will it be for the average of the quarter? Laurie, one thing that quite often I think this year, and maybe it's always the case, we move from looking at the glass half full to looking at the glass half empty, but the entirety of the glass doesn't necessarily change much. At the moment, we're not looking at the glass half full part where there's all sorts of geopolitical tensions, getting a lot of headlines, but not necessarily having much impact on the oil markets, who are more obsessed with where the Fed's going, where's China demand going. But where do you think geopolitics are going? Because we're certainly getting much noisier headlines, both in the Middle East and in Ukraine, but not having any feed through to the energy markets. Looking first at the Middle East, coming out of the summer with a new Iranian president, what does the big moving parts look like to you in terms of Israel, Saudi, Iran, obviously the trauma in Gaza, and in your home country too, Lebanon.
Yeah, so I think now they don't forget, like they're all like looking at the US elections. And I believe like many of these countries and leaders of these countries that you mentioned in the Middle East are calculating like who's best for them for the presidency in the US, and how they can work to make that the president of their choice get to power. So that's the kind of calculations, and based on that they would decide on what to do on the local or internal or regional issues. So let's say about the deal between Hamas and Israel. Would they want to have a deal before the elections, or they would wait for the new president, whoever the president is? It's more that they could do the deal under his or her watch. Same for the Iranians now. Would they want to go, like Khamenei has said that yes, we are ready. It's okay to negotiate with the enemy. Enemy meaning in this case the US, meaning that yes, we are okay to go back to negotiating with the Americans. But who in the which president do they want to negotiate with? A Biden and a Harris administration or a Trump administration? And based on that, they would decide like what their intervention would be now in the coming 2 months about a possible deal in the region or not, or keep everything as it is, and the new president, whoever can help them deal with it. So that's that's what's happening. Like there's a lot of pressure now in Israel because of the hostages, and the families are protesting, but this has been like going on for many months. And then Netanyahu is still sticking to his position with the others in his government. Hamas, the same, sticking to their positions. On the contrary, now going even more extreme, calling for suicide bomb attacks, etc. inside Israel. Hezbollah has retaliated, and they said, like, on our side, we're done. We've retaliated, and now we go back to the normal, daily attacks, or whatever they want to call it, between Israel and Lebanon. But at least it's not as high as it was like during summertime. It's down, and again waiting for the next phase, which is like what will happen on the Israeli-Palestinian front, and then as well on the Iranian and the American front. So I guess things are moving, but at the same time they're all watching for this election to happen by November. It's a lot for people that are like suffering under the attacks in all the places. But like, I guess like this is kind of what we are sensing, like kind of like a decrease in tensions and continued attacks and waiting for the elections.
Narendra, just picking up on that, of course, from India's perspective, we saw your prime minister on a visit recently, both to Russia over the summer and also recently to Ukraine, first visit since this conflict has started. Your thoughts on these two major conflicts that the world is living with, that they're contained. From India's perspective, are they contained? There's obviously the occasional concern bubbles up that they could spread and become a major catastrophe for everybody, not only for the poor people that are underneath it. But your thoughts from an India perspective: A, why did Modi go to Ukraine? B, can India play a role in resolving any of these things? And from a general perspective, are these contained now? They will not escalate.
Well, first, Europe and Ukraine, I mean, our sense is that probably is kind of already contained. Whatever happens is going to happen within that limited geography. Might include, Russia, but would be happening within that. What we might see in time to come, because Russia has its own stand and Europe and the NATO has its own stand, I think even if, for instance, there is some kind of, light at the end of the tunnel, is going to be a frozen war, in the sense that, they may not be fighting, but there will be military tension. And on the one hand, Europe, NATO, Europe will be preparing, and Russia, of course, would also be preparing. So I think kind of like sometimes something like what happened in Cyprus or what happened in Korea, that kind of situation where eventually they might agree, all right, whatever you have, especially in terms of Crimea and all that, you keep, and the rest is what it is. We don't know, but I think, but it's a long-term thing. I think it's what we're going to see in time to come in Ukraine is a frozen war. We don't see any solution as yet. The reason our Prime Minister traveled to Ukraine was to convey to Ukraine and to the people there that, look, we wish you well, we are with you. You are a democracy, you are a sovereign country, and we understand all that. At the same time, Russia is a close friend, and so is Ukraine. So it's not that we are, we are with this country or that country. That was a message, very powerful message to convey, and at the same time to convey the sympathy. There are lots of people in India who sympathize with Ukraine. There are many who are, kind of look upon, buy more into what Russia has to say. We are a democracy, so government has to respond to it. But coming to the Middle East, I mean, my own sense is that, probably like Iran's response, we all expected, after the assassination of, Hamas leader in Tehran, northern Tehran, probably Iran is going to react in a very violent manner and all that. That didn't happen. So it shows that there is a kind of more maturity, or probably Iran does want to get into it, a full-fledged war. And we also know that Russia, which is a major supporter of Iran, probably doesn't want Iran or situation to escalate. They want to focus on Ukraine. China has invested heavily in Iran, and China really looks upon Iran as a major market, major supplier of oil. They also don't want to see Iran getting into any kind of escalated war situation. So that means that Iran has to take its own call, considering what two major supporters, their views totally different. And I think my own sense is Iran's economy is not that strong, and the fact that they have not responded means that they are also looking for some kind of solution. So I think the situation like that will continue. What happens in terms of between Palestinians and Israel, that is the solution. But the major question is that many people ask, if there is a Palestinian state tomorrow to which Israel agree to, or the Arabs agree to, would that be a kind of state more like the UAE, or would that be more like Afghanistan? We don't know. So there are many questions being asked. But at the moment, the way I'm looking at it, I don't really see any light at the end of the tunnel. We might see the both sides may get tired at the same time, sit across the table, but would that lead to any solution? Would, for instance, the new occupant in the White House would deliver any magic solution? I personally don't think it's anything of that happening. And the both parties will get tired. They sit across the table, might try to talk, might try to convey they want peace, but unless and until there is a Palestinian state, where the people are satisfied that it is our state, we want to develop our own future this way and that way, and that happening, is that kind of going to be reality soon? That doesn't look like a possibility, at least when I look at the horizon today. So on Middle East will continue to be the way it has been, or the continue the way it is, and that's not a good news for economies like India.
No, not good for anybody, especially for the people of Palestine. There's the result of the survey: closer to 80, closer to 75, closer to 70, closer to 80 getting most of the nods in this room, which would be a big climb up from where we're at. But I do feel like we are in this window of the glass half full and looking at the bearish side of the glass at the moment, not the bullish side that tells us the US economy is still doing incredibly well. China's not great, but it still imported 11 million barrels in August, etc. And once the Fed pulled their trigger, I think we might get back to the other side of the glass than we are at the moment. But thank you so much. Really great to have the three of the best back at the table. Narendra Taneja in India, Laurie Hitayan in Belgium, and Clyde Russell, of course, out there in Australia. Really wonderful to have your insights today, and look forward to catching up with you all again soon. Take care and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.